I think we're all really here because of the speech given by David Cameron in January. And on the day that he gave that speech, I was up in China, and it certainly did make an impact. It was on the news, it was in the newspapers. One meeting I had with a local government official, not someone from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs or anything, just a working level local government official. He turned to me afterwards and said, "Oh, by the way, I see that Britain is leaving the EU." Well, not quite, but I think that, first of all, I think demonstrates that we have a lot of work to do in getting messages across in a place like China about Britain's relationship with the EU. But it also demonstrates that there is an interest in China, at least among opinion formers and policymakers, as to how Britain relates to the EU. This is a topic which people are interested in and which people are following. So I looked at a little bit of the media commentary around this speech, and I have to say that the rhetoric of that is actually pretty negative. The general sense in the Chinese media was that this was an indication of a big difficulty facing the UK in its relationship with Europe, that this was, if anything, an indication of further UK marginalisation within Europe, of UK decline. I don't think there's a clear statement of Chinese government policy at the moment, but my sense is that Chinese policy elites, Chinese opinion formers would like the UK to stay in the EU, that the EU is seen as being stronger with the UK in it. There is little advantage from the Chinese perspective for the UK to be marginalised or to leave the European Union. Without the UK, the EU itself becomes a less important, just slightly less important anyway, partner from a Chinese perspective.
I think the first point I would want to deal with is the need to deal with the period of uncertainty that sadly the Prime Minister has left with us. So what do I mean by that? I think it's been unfortunate that the Prime Minister has committed to having a EU referendum in 2017 if the current government was elected, because that creates this uncertainty. And the uncertainty causes businessmen to lose confidence and hence delay making business decisions that are going to generate the trade and indeed generate the job and the GDP growth rate that we're looking for in the UK. So firstly, I think we need to overcome this period of uncertainty, and I don't know that we can do anything about that, as the Prime Minister has already made his choice on that. But I think there are some other benefits that the UK has. I certainly support the view that the UK should be part of the EU because I think it's going to support our export-led economy. And when I sit here and I have a 6-month-old granddaughter called Stella, at least I can say to her, I tried.
From the Turkish perspective, UK inside the EU is a more valuable ally. And I'm going to emphasize more the foreign policy and security cooperation in contrast to the economic partnership. Over the last 2 decades, the key goal for Turkey has been membership in the EU. As you know, Turkey's candidacy seemed to be going well early on, but the accession negotiations are now stalled. The UK has been one of the strongest supporters inside the EU of Turkey's EU membership. A UK outside the EU would mean that Turkey will have lost an important ally that supported its EU membership. And I think that's a very important point for Turkey, because Turkey, despite all the talk about whether Turkey is turning east, remains committed to EU membership. If I may be a little more specific, it appears that the Eurozone crisis is forcing the EU more and more into a 2-tier structure made up of the Eurozone countries at the core and the non-Eurozone members as a second tier. Turkish foreign policy makers have realistically recognized that it is only within this second tier that Turkey can hope to have a place, if it ever is inside, if it is ever accepted as a EU member. So Turkish policymakers very much hope that UK will be part of this second tier in the future, and in fact it will lead this second tier.
From a US perspective, I would say that the US-UK relationship has three legs. It's like a stool with three legs. One leg is the assets the UK brings to the table. This is military assets, this is intelligence assets, this is diplomatic assets that is extraordinarily useful to the US. The second leg is a little bit more intangible. It's about, as one American ambassador once told me, the most useful meetings I have in a country are the lunches I have once a week with the British ambassador. Because in those lunches, you get a private, off-the-record opinion that is different from all the messages that you're hearing through the State Department, through your own officials. So you're getting a different perspective on a problem. And the American government has a tendency to hear certain things because people want things off the American government. The British government hears something different. So it's this intangible, alternate perception on issues that is extraordinarily useful and makes up the second leg of what the US finds so useful about its relationship with the UK. The third leg is the UK and EU relationship. And partly this is kind of entree into the EU, but partly it's, and perhaps more importantly than this, it's the belief in the United States that America and the UK have a similar set of values, we have a similar set of interests, and therefore, knowing the UK is in the EU, your interests are being represented. Your views are being represented. America doesn't need to be there, and America doesn't need to worry about what happens within the EU and the conversations within the EU, because they've got a friend on the inside that basically holds the same set of assumptions. One of the other things that came out of some of the conversations I've had is what about, and I just want to kind of a little footnote on this, if I might, what about a UK, as you say, in the margins, if it were a tier 2 country, if the EU were to make this split? And the general view in the US is, particularly on economic issues, frankly, if the UK is on the margins or the UK is out, it doesn't make much difference. If the UK is going to be in, it needs to be in. Back to this idea of the UK representing, not representing the US, but at least holding the same set of values and therefore pushing and pulling the EU in ways that are of the interest to the United Kingdom and almost by definition also to the United States. So a UK out of the EU is one leg of the stool gone.